Welcome, everybody, to the fourth episode of the Xay Knows Ball podcast. My name is Xavier. We've got a lot to cover this week. The NBA draft just concluded on Wednesday, and it really got me thinking about youth sports. I am 24 years old, but it really got me thinking about even at the college and high school level, with this summer being about prospects developing within the summer league. So during the deep cut, we're going to explore something that a lot of former players and coaches and people around the basketball landscape think has been a problem for years now and is potentially ruining the game. So when we come back, the deep cut. So I'll start off with this. Kobe Bryant, rest his soul, had made a comment about right around before he retired, and he had talked about what AAU basketball has done for the game of basketball and for players heading to the NBA and what impact it has on the game. Let's take a listen.
Not pretty critical. I'm extremely critical. Because it doesn't teach our players how to play the right way, how to think the game, how to play in combinations of threes. I think everything is it's a reward system. I think coaches who are teaching the game are getting rewarded one fashion or another, and it's just a showcase.
Do you feel like
it's absolutely horrible for the game.
The young guys that are coming up, do you feel like the game is kind of stiff, whereas when your guys were more skilled?
Yeah, but I think that was just by luck in the generation that I grew up in. You know what I mean? Because like my generation is when the AAU basketball really started becoming shit. And I got lucky because I grew up in Europe.
Right.
Everything there was still fundamental. So I learned all the basics. And I think we're doing a tremendous disservice to our young basketball players right now. That's something that definitely needs to be fixed, and it's going to be one of the things that I definitely focus on.
So my biggest takeaway from that was this idea of playing the right way in European basketball. First, it's pretty well regarded at this point that a lot of the top European players that come into the league are more fundamentally sound than a lot of these American-born athletes. And fundamentally sound meaning they will make the extra pass. They won't over-dribble in certain situations. They slow the game down and don't always rely on overpowering athleticism. Those are just some of the traits. A lot of the European guys, they're not super athletic. They are just the smartest guy in the room. And playing the right way, it boils down to American athletes not necessarily always having the best structure around them. So I will say, I did not play collegiate basketball, but I did play high school basketball on the organized level, played varsity for a few years, and I also played AAU throughout my entire childhood. So I've seen the comparison and structure between you playing on your high school team, where you have a set structure and plays and a system that needs to be ran, compared to AAU, where it's kind of more of, I'm just going to be blunt, go get a bucket. Like, go score. Like, it's, again, more of a showcase, like Kobe's talking about. And that is beneficial for some players who need to get their recognition out there. But for developing traits that can help you at the next level, it's not always there. Because a lot of those things are ignored. Even like picking your teammate up after a foul, or just certain parts of the game that you would not ever experience really in an AAU format. It's really interesting. It also brings up this idea that players can't always play a role. And if we look at the NBA, there are over 450 players in the NBA. And if we're going to say that maybe after the second option, you were considered a role player, that makes there 60 non-role players, meaning there are over 300 and something players who are forced to adapt to a role when they get to the league. And most of these guys are people who are the best players on their college teams or the best players on their high school teams and were the best players on their teams their entire life. And they had to develop a way to play with their teammates who are better than them once they get to the NBA. And not all players are able to do it. you see there are plenty of players who flame out because they can't really adjust to a role. And Gino Auriemma, who we're going to listen to in a second, puts this in a play and perspective and puts some emphasis and some blame on the parents for how this structure is lost with our younger athletes.
Kids inherently want to be good teammates. I really believe that with all my heart. Most kids, when they're on a team, I guarantee you go watch any 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds, they want to be good teammates. You watch them play. When they get a little bit older and they start having a little more success and then the parents get involved, they become not so great teammates because they're told a lot of times that you're not going to get anywhere unless you shine, unless you know. So now, back in the day, we had AAU tournaments. You had to win X number of games to qualify for the national championship. And you played on your team, and you had to live in your state or whatever, your area to play. And you played, and if you lost, you went home, and it was devastating. And that's Rebecca and Jamel Elliott and Jen Rosati and Nikisha Sales, going, Megan Patterson, as far back as then. Well, that's changed. Now when kids go to these tournaments, they're not going there to win games. They're going there so that the coach can see them exhibit their skills. So this idea of winning for the weekend doesn't exist anymore. So it's not their fault. That's just the way it is.
So Gino does mention some of the issues that I talked about. However, the contrary to that could be that these teams can hinder a player's development and individually. And the reality is you will not be recruited by a high D1 basketball school by being only a role player. That is the reality. Regardless of what coaches say, and these coaches know 20 times more information than me, all of the top D1 guys who makes the NBA, they are the best players on their team. I guess the point that they are trying to make is you need to carry these fundamental skills with you in addition to the talent. Because if it's one way, and when I say one way, I mean you have the talent, you have the athleticism, but you lack any other sort of intangibles or fundamentals. You still might make the NBA, but when you get to the highest level, that flaw will ultimately be exposed. And another thing that I thought of when Gino was talking about this is I've heard college coaches and coaches on every level talk about the comparison between school basketball and AAU basketball and focusing on the point that school basketball, you practice every day of the week and then you play one game. So the amount of time you practice significantly outweighs the amount of games you play. AAU basketball is the complete opposite, where in AAU, you play on tournaments where you could be playing 4, 5, 6 games a weekend, depending on how well you play, and you practice maybe 1 to 2 days a week. So there is a complete outweigh and balance in the amount of games to the amount of practice. For some people, that could be a good thing. Some people might think game reps is the way to get them better compared to a bunch of practices. We're doing conditioning, you're doing all these other things. So that can have varying opinions. But the fact still remains. It's the complete opposite. So if you were trying to mold a player into a fundamentally sound player, that player needs to practice more than they play. If you're trying to build a player who has the intangibles and doesn't necessarily have the game reps, then AAU basketball might be the way for them. Because say what you want about it, AAU basketball, whether it's the Peach Jam or the Hoop Summit, the NBA has invested into getting exposure for these players at these tournaments. Because most of the time, these are the first, second, third, fourth top-rated recruits in the country, and they're playing against each other. To where a lot of times in school basketball, with these players being good from all around the country, you'll never see these guys play against each other. And I do think that is one of the positives to where we can see AJ DePanza and Duran Peterson go against each other multiple times, whether it's through school basketball, but mainly AAU basketball. So we're able to see these top showcase talent, while the biggest league in the world, the biggest basketball league in the world, is able to showcase these guys from 12, 13, 14. Again, that could also be a problem because they are receiving this spotlight and this level of individual fame that could ultimately not allow them to carry traits that make a good teammate. It's the truth. It's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. And Rasheed Wallace mentioned this as well, where, and we'll listen to this in a second, where players can't develop a second skill. They focus on what they're good at. If they're extremely athletic, they'll just use their athleticism to be the best player and not really focus on developing their shooting. Or if vice versa, if they're a great shooter, their defense or their athleticism really won't be developed until they get to college. And that makes them incomplete players. So let's listen to what Rasheed has to say.
I felt as though with AAU, a lot of these kids are one facet. Either I could dribble the shit out the ball, I'm fast and get to the rim. I'm a good shooter. I'm athletic. I could block a shot. I'm athletic. I can catch anything within a 5-foot radius of the rim. It's all, a lot of these kids are one facet. But what I always tell guys when I work them out, no matter high school or college, I'm like, look, the easiest way to make the league is play defense.
Again, adding on to a similar point where these players feel that they have to score 30 for them to get recognized by a scout. And ultimately, that leads into their AAU game, them being more worried about scoring 30 than winning the game. Both have to be true. You need to have the talent. I'm not here to say that role players are going to get high D1 scholarships because they're not. That's not the reality of it. And a lot of these experienced individuals that we've heard have made it to these top levels. So at the same time, I'm not really always willing to give them the benefit of the doubt when they're AAU coaches who I'm sure work hard to implement structure and balance and team fundamentals into their systems. But at this point, I think the reputation of AAU basketball has been damaged. It still works, but people are starting to figure out some of the flaws, and it's only going to come out more when a lot of the top NBA players are international. When we're getting Luka and Xay and Jokic and Giannis, and these guys are all fundamentally sound. That flaw is going to come up more and more. And we're going to reflect on why does the world have a leg up on Americans in this way? And ultimately, these are some of the reasons why. I'm not here to make an opinion. I've played both. But at the same time, I acknowledge the exposure and level of competitiveness that AAU brings. And also just allows players to be free. They can go play without having to hear necessarily a coach in their ear telling them to run this set play. They can just play how they played their entire life. But I do get the latter side of it as well. It hinders development. So that's this episode of The Deep Cut. I know it went longer. It was just something I really needed to point out. With the NBA draft being finished and this summer being about college basketball recruiting and transfers, it was something I needed to address. When we come back, we'll be going straight into Xay Unchecked. We heard a lot of interviews today, so we won't be doing Run That Back. Xay Unchecked when we get back. All right, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the NBA draft was on Wednesday, and I've been holding in my draft winners and losers for this segment. And I've had some time to think, and we're going to get right into it. So I'm going to start with my draft winners. I'm going to give 3 teams. And I think one is going to be the ultimate winner, who I think really outright won the draft. and then two other teams that I thought did relatively well, and I enjoyed their draft. First, I'm going to give my team that I thought knocked it out the park. And that was Oklahoma City, again. And I don't know how they keep doing it. They had the 15th overall pick, and they took Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. And he is this athlete who can run the floor. He's got mobility. He just fits right in next to a Chet. And even if they decide to move on from Isaiah Hartenstein, he is the replacement. And the fact that they were able to land someone like him, who was even sometimes mocked in the top 10, was just such a value steal for where he went. Like, there's just no way I can overlook that. Next up, my next winner, the San Antonio Spurs. I still have questions about the fit of Dylan Harper next to Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox. As far as on the basketball fit, I have questions still. But Dylan Harper was unquestionably the best player available. And you took, not a reach, but you took the right player there. But Carter Bryant at 14 was honestly still a little bit of a value play as well. Like, I've seen Carter Bryant in some top 10s, top 8s in mock drafts. But again, he's a guy that's going to fit in right away. Right away as a role player. And that just makes me think that Keldon Johnson or Devin Vassell are 100% on their way out. Because he fits in like a glove playing off the ball. True 3-and-D guy. The fact that the Spurs were able to get those two in the lottery, A+ draft. The last team that I thought did well based on where they picked. I'm going to go with the Charlotte Hornets. Because the Charlotte Hornets came away with this draft with Con Knippel and Ryan Kalkbrenner. Con Knippel was, quote-unquote, the safe pick at 4, where we know what he's going to bring you, but there are questions about his long-term upside as a high-level scorer. But we know what he's going to bring to your team, and Charlotte needs that. They don't need the creator guy that's all about him. And I think Ace Bailey's a great pick. I think he would have been a disaster in Charlotte. Con is the exact guy that they need who can play off two of their ball-dominant guys, can shoot the ball, and you know he's very fundamentally sound. And I know that sounds cliche, but that is literally Con Knippel. And he has some juice to him, too. When Cooper was out in the ACC tournament, Con led that team. So I'm not doubting his ability to create off the dribble as well. And Ryan Kalkbrenner, considering the Hornets have no centers and zero defensive liability, the fact they got him in the second round, I thought worked. Now, the losers. Unfortunately, there have to be losers. The first, and I feel like this is an overwhelming loser. And as a franchise, they're not a loser, but their draft I was not a fan. The Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets had 5 first-round picks in this draft, for people who are wondering. They drafted Igor Demin from BYU, Nolan Traore from France, Ben Serif from Israel, Danny Wolf from Michigan, and Drake Powell from UNC. And when you look at these players, about half of them all need the ball in their hands. So I just struggle to see, and I actually am higher on Igor than a lot of people are, but I'm struggling to see how they can develop all of these guys at once. I do like Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf's my favorite guy from the pack. But again, even Danny Wolf needs the ball as a big. That's how he played. He was the team that they ran their offense through him. So I'm just very confused to see how they're going to manage to get all these guys on the court and manage to develop all these guys at the same time. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any other losers. It's just the Brooklyn Nets. When you have 5 first-round picks and there are questions whether you can hit on even one of them, you've had a poor draft. That's this week of Xay Unchecked. The Summer League will be in a few weeks, so we can monitor how wrong and right I am. But That's this episode of the Weekly Rundown, the 4th episode of the Xay Knows Ball podcast. I'm Xavier. You guys have a good one.